Welcome to the Mandatory Social Interaction Show. I'm your host, Eric, along with the ever-present Tim.
That's not true.
Yeah, that's not even true at all.
And the never-present Ben.
Well, that is also not true.
So, welcome, Tim. Tim was never not here.
I'm back. I didn't have to work through MSIS this week.
Yeah, so those of you who are new to MSIS, Tim is our new guest host. No, Tim's been out for a few weeks, and then Ben was out for a week or so there as well. So this is the first one we've had where all three of us are together for it's been a while.
Yeah. It's good.
Yay!
Good. I cleared off my
Yay!
desk and I don't know where everything is.
So yeah, no, it's awesome. It's awesome to have everybody back. This is good. We are firing on all cylinders now.
Such as it is, yeah.
Yeah, such as it is.
I mean, that's implying I had all my cylinders to begin with, but
So, well, we have a few things to talk about. This week is going to be game heavy. It's all game stuff. So we're going to start with our first thing here. I think somebody posted this on Twitter, or at least it was suggested to me, and that is we're just going to start with the quote here, and then we'll go from there. It's a shame that AAA games do little to set the bar, but indie titles innovate and rarely get recognition that they deserve.
mm-hmm.
So I don't remember. I think Tim might be the one who said that.
That was actually I think it was John Mann.
John Mann, okay.
John Mann or something like that. I don't know how to pronounce it on Twitter, and I thought that was a fantastic topic.
Yeah, well, and I know and I wanted to wait until everyone was on here because I know it was Tim's suggestion, but Ben, I definitely want to hear your thoughts on that as an indie game developer. I think we kind of run the gamut here from semi-casual game player, over here on the left. In the middle, we've got Tim, the streamer, who's, if not a professional gamer, certainly makes money playing games. And I'm pretty sure that's the definition of a professional anything. Makes money doing it, but I could be wrong. And then
you can still be an amateur. I would say professional would be that's your profession, and it's not technically my profession.
Yeah, make a living off of it.
True. Fair enough. I think at that point we're just splitting hairs.
Fair enough.
And then Ben, of course, who developed Color Jumper, an amazing little platformer that I cannot play because I suck at great little platformers.
God, that game's so frustrating. I hate you, birds.
Yeah. If I ever make a sequel, it'll be easier. Don't worry.
Thank you. Have a Tim mode.
A Tim mode. So what does everybody kind of think about that? I mean, I'll go first and say that I tend to agree that I think indie titles tend to take more risks, both with their gameplay and with other elements of the game, and I think they are. I think part of being indie allows them to do that, and I think a good example would be something like No Man's Sky, where they really did take some big risks with that game. And it was promoted, I think, poorly, but they took.
Yeah, that's an understatement.
Well, right, but I mean, the thing is, it's if you look at it kind of objectively, there's Sony apparently took that and then started promoting the hell out of it when really it shouldn't have been. It should have just been left alone as an indie game. Where it probably would have just quietly found its audience, and the people who like it would have liked it, and then the people who didn't like it, would have just kind of avoided it, as opposed to what happened, which is a different thing. But even something like Braid or Limbo, those are some more famous or mainstream indie games that were able to take some gameplay risks, like Braid with the time thing, with time only advances as you move in some way. Super Hot did something similar. Limbo's art direction is super risky. I mean, the whole thing is essentially silhouettes. And that's, it's super. I mean, it's great. They're great games. I really love them, and that's stuff you're not going to see come out of Ubisoft.
Well, I think when somebody says that they do little to set the bar, I feel like that's inaccurate, because to me, AAA titles are what sets the bar that need to be aimed toward. AAA games are the equivalent of your AAA movie blockbusters, right? They're the flashy ones with all the special effects. They might not be the most well written. They might be, not the most beautiful pieces of cinema, but their big budgets enable them to do things that really give you something to that kind of inspire awe to an
They're Marvel
extent.
movies. I mean,
Yes,
yeah,
the Marvel movies. They don't do
absolutely.
anything like superb with the media,
Churn 'em
but
out.
they set that bar to where indie games can strive for that quality. But in terms of like innovation and things like that, yes, there's a lot of indie games that innovate and do some really unique things. But to say they rarely get the recognition they deserve, I don't know is super accurate either, because I feel like there are just, I mean, anybody can make an art film, right? Anybody can go out and record a film and say, hey, this is my film. And a lot of people can develop a video game. And I'm not saying, like it's super easy. It's not. It's a lot of work, as is an art film. But they don't necessarily get recognition because there's a billion of them. And it's hard to break into that market and get recognition when, there's 80, 90, 100 other games releasing in a similar window in the same genre on the same day. Yeah.
And I believe it really all does come down to risk, where it's like AAA games cost a lot to make, and they have to make that money back.
Mm-hmm.
So they take the safer routes that they know will make that money back. And there are games like No Man's Sky where they do take a risk, and sometimes it bites them in the ass, and then they've lost all that money. And that just teaches the AAA developers to not take risks. So yeah, it's like the stuff like the sports games like Madden and the Call of Duties, where they just make a new one every year. That's the reason why they make a new one every year.
Yeah, and that's one thing. One thing I would argue, though, is just like with big budget movies, big budget gaming, they can't afford to take too many risks, because there's so much money on the line. You're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, just like big budget movies. Big budget games can even cost more than big budget movies. And they need to be able to recoup that. So they need to, I mean, one thing they have to do is try to make a game that appeals to their audience, whatever that is. So if their audience is, Call of Duty, right? They kind of have an idea of what the Call of Duty demographic is, and they kind of have to appeal to it. So they can only make iterative changes from game to game, whereas an indie developer can just kind of say, I'm literally aiming this game at the weirdos like me.
Yeah. And I agree. I mean, if you look at the way AAA games have to operate, is they have a fan base to please, they have stockholders to please, and then it doesn't leave a lot of room for them to make all these sweeping changes every time a new game comes out. And I think that's part of why people complain about things like Call of Duty. They're not that different from each other. They're so very similar in so many ways. But ultimately, it comes down to how much fun do you get out of that game? How well is it marketed? And are they making a return on their investment? And those are the things that really only matter to them. Like, innovation can come in small increments, but if you do look at like Madden games, they change one, maybe two things every iteration. They don't make massive changes. So it's like maybe they'll improve the graphics one gen, and then the next generation they'll improve the AI, and then the next generation they'll improve the way crowds look and react, and that sort of stuff. And I don't know if it's necessarily a good or a bad thing, but it is definitely something. It's just different. Like, they just have to operate differently,
Well, and I think it's also partially iterative because they have a deadline. They have to release a new one every year, so they can only do so many things in that year.
True.
They can't like strip down everything and rebuild it from scratch. So
right. Yeah.
So I got a question then. The corollary to this would be something like if an indie game becomes popular and mainstream, it
Mhm.
ceases to innovate and ceases to be an indie game. And I think we have an interesting example of PUBG, where PUBG was more or less an indie game. It came out, it was like one guy who kind of said, "I'm going to make this battle royale style game." Ended up selling it to Tencent, and then it became this huge thing. But I think it didn't start as a huge thing, and as a matter of fact, it was kind of a unique gameplay thing when it came out. I mean, you can argue where it came from, like Battle Royale the movie, or the manga, or the or
Or the Arma mods that he also designed.
the Arma. Yeah, I mean, like,
yeah.
but
It's been
again,
around for a long time. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but again, I mean, even Arma mods, if you're thinking about stuff like that, I mean, that's an indie niche, right? So it like Arma, like Mintrovert in the chat is saying it started in Arma 3. If it started in Arma
Yeah.
3, that's great, but nobody, like there was only a small niche of people playing it in Arma 3, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you're
And
Well,
what was it? I don't even remember what the game was called, and then it moved to H1Z1 King of the Kill,
yeah.
Mhm.
and that I think H1Z1's also an Arma mod or something like that.
I mean,
So-
Well, and
or another example would be Dota, right?
yep, I was
Dota-
just gonna say Dota started as a Warcraft 3 mod,
Yeah.
Yep.
and it just like iterated from there. It's like that's where a lot of like genres can come from, because
Yep.
you already have the framework for the game, and you can just tinker around with the mechanics.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but at that point, like, does it cease being like an indie game? And obviously Dota 2 probably not an indie game, right? Like, I mean, that was
Right.
kind of Valve essentially taking the Dota thing and putting it in the Source engine or whatever engine it is, and making it, a standalone thing.
Well, I think the second half of that entire Twitter post for me is a little bit. I don't know. I think it's a little unfair to say they barely get the recognition they deserve. I mean, if you look at games like Undertale, Stardew Valley, Limbo, like you mentioned earlier, Bastion, Kerbal Space Program, Stanley Parable, Meat Boy. I mean, there are these are games that have sold more than some triple A's do when they're bad.
Yeah, true,
so
yeah.
so I just find it a bit of a I find it a bit treating indie as the little guy in the room, when technically by definition they're the little guy. But indie games do really well, especially now that there's more support via not only just Steam, which Steam is a bit of a crap show, which I think we're going to talk about later anyways.
Yeah.
But like Xbox does indies now, and they give a lot of support for indies to port their games to Xbox, which helps them find more market. Sony has had a really good run with indie developers lately. Nintendo's been putting a lot of indie games on their platform.
Yep.
So to say that they are mistreated and looked at as I feel like a lot of it is perception that we've built up ourselves. As
but I would argue
as gamers, but go for it.
I was going to say, I would argue that that perception is there now, and that's like the perception now, but I think that was the reality not long ago.
Yes, that's correct. I agree.
It's not like that perception has no basis in reality. And the other point I would make is, for all the indie games that make it, it's like indie film, right? For all the indie films that actually get a national distribution deal, there's probably 500 that you've never heard of.
Yeah, but I mean that's the nature of the open, the ability for anyone to download an IDE and start developing a game and download assets from, the Unity store or something like that,
But indie film, that's not true, and the ratio is still roughly that. I mean, no one's just downloading film assets and editing them together, or very few people are. They don't.
Maybe if you look at if you draw the comparison, maybe rather than indie film, maybe because indie film has evolved over a very long time, and there's kind of a medium there that people understand, and there's expectations around it. Whereas I feel like indie games are a little bit more the Wild West in a lot of regards.
Yeah.
It's
And
becoming normalized, though. I mean, all of this stuff is
Right.
becoming normalized in some way.
Absolutely.
And I mean, if you really want a good comparison, think of indie music from like 15 years ago or 10 years ago, where a lot of the barriers of entry were becoming part of a label, becoming signed by somebody. And that's really what games are these days. And I think it's more of an issue of semantics, or not semantics, context, where indie, like by definition, just means not really, doesn't have a publisher. Indie studios can still like have a staff. They can have like 8 to 10 people working on a game. They can have like people on payroll. It's just that they don't have a publisher. They don't have people that they are like beholden to finish the game. They're working on their own schedule. And I think that's really what indie means, is independent.
Yeah.
And a lot of that can be kind of tracked back to music 8 to 10 or so years ago, where if you don't have, back then, if you didn't have a label, if you didn't have a publisher, you're not going to really get noticed anywhere. But with the internet and with all of the tools becoming more accessible to people, it's a lot easier for somebody to be able to just sit down and write an album over a month and push it on DistroKid, and then it's out everywhere and everybody can experience it. And that's analogous to downloading Unity and putting it on Steam. And obviously it's still a little bit more complicated than that, but putting it on itch.io, for example. And you can make a game and release it for basically free now, and it doesn't matter if it makes money, because you're still able to like sit down and create and express yourself through that art form or that art medium. And so,
and I guess one question kind of becomes, though, like as an independent artist, is the problem of being an independent artist always just going to be getting noticed? Is that really what this tweet is talking about? Because for instance, I know Color Jumper has some brilliant gameplay innovations, in my opinion. And I know other reviewers have said, some reviews that I've seen online, like on YouTube, have said, like, Color Jumper, I mean, they've, some of the fair reviews have said, graphically, maybe it's not super interesting, but, which I disagree with. I actually think it's super cool, but, they've also said, like, gameplay wise, it's got a really unique hook. It's got a really interesting, idea. And then it does kind of the Portal thing, where it takes that mechanic and keeps iterating and making that mechanic do new things that you didn't think it could do. Which is really smart and really clever, yet it's not noticed. It's not really noticed. I mean, unfortunately, I know Ben's been, working as hard as he can to try and get noticed. But it's being like kind of shoved into the corner. And I'm not saying that like asset flips aren't a problem, but when truly innovative games like Ben's can kind of get passed up, for whatever reasons. Like, I mean, I don't understand why somebody on Kotaku or RPS hasn't reviewed it.
I don't know either. I sent them copies.
And my kind of my point is, like, I almost feel like there's an upper class and lower class, and those are bad words. Those are not really the words I mean. But I feel like there's like the I can't think of any words that aren't loaded with other meanings. It's like, but there's like the hipster indie, or like the mainstream indie. Maybe mainstream indie is the way to say it, right? The indie games that get really popular, Super Hot or Braid or Bastion, or and then there's like the under the radar indie games. And I think, from this tweet, I think we can make a differentiation between indie games that are actually innovative versus, asset flips. And I think we can also say that, in my opinion, there's probably a ton of indie games out there that nobody knows about. I downloaded a whole pack of these indie puzzle games the other day. It was on Steam for like $1.99, and I've probably
Mhm.
spent 4 or 5 hours playing all. I think it was 3 or 4 games, and I've probably spent about 4 or 5 hours on all of them. And they're brilliant, and I don't think anyone's ever heard of them. I just happened to like stumble across it, and I went, "Oh my god, these are really." I stumbled across it. It was like $1.99, and I was like, "This looks interesting." Like I'm looking at the gameplay video and going, "Oh, this looks like it's kind of like fun and maybe makes you think a little bit." And for $1.99, I got like 4 games and probably 10 hours worth of gameplay. Um, for it was like Hamster on Cake Games. And you know what, Pizza? I will. That's like their the company, the studio, and then I'll find out the game names, Pizza, because I can't quite remember them off the top of my head. Um, Brilliant little games though, not real expensive, and I guarantee you, I would be shocked if there were like rock paper shotgun reviews of these.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's part of the problem. It's just getting noticed, getting the word out there. And I think part of the problem that I had with Color Jumper is that I had never released a game before, so I didn't have a group of people who are interested in the games that I made. And a lot of this is iterative. It's something where you have to do it a lot, and you have to release a lot of things to get noticed, because every time you release a game, you get like another handful of followers, and it's that momentum thing.
Yeah. Well, pedigree goes a long way. I mean, if you can show a track record of solid releases, even if they're small, people are much more likely to get excited, and like you said, they start to follow closer.
Yep.
I don't know. I don't know if I have anything else for that, because like honestly, like for me, it's there's so many indie games out there that they all can't get noticed, and to say they don't get the recognition that they deserve, I feel like is a little unfair, just because it is a massive ocean of titles.
True.
Yeah.
And like not everything can make it. So, and I mean, it's the same thing with like streaming and stuff. Like not everything can make it to the top of the top and be super recognized. But I feel like indie games, like I just feel like it's more of a mentality that we've adopted and carried over that's kind of dated. Like to say they don't get the recognition they deserve, I think is devaluing the ones that have done well and pushed forward the medium, like Stardew and Undertale and Kerbal and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, and that's I think you're always going to have that problem, right? I mean, if you were an indie band in the '90s, you were not getting recognized at all, right? I mean, you were hoping that you would. I mean, really, the hope was you could sell out, right? The hope was to sell out without your fans thinking you sold out, but getting noticed in the local scene, and then hopefully that becomes the regional scene, and then and then hopefully you catch the notice of a record company who puts you on the national scene, and then et cetera, right?
Right.
And unfortunately, I mean, one of the things that's interesting is because the barrier to entries are now so low, both for music and for video games, essentially it's like $100 to get on the Steam store. Or you can release stuff for free on itch.io, and you can probably get on GOG if you want to, or you can probably get into the Humble store. And I don't think
Jumper was rejected by the Humble store.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh,
Really?
They were too busy to put it up there.
No.
It's petition time. Everyone in the chat,
I'm gonna start boycotting.
Yeah, we need a petition to get Color Jumper on the freaking Humble store. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that. That makes me rethink my Humble store purchases.
No. I don't care. It's fine.
But anyway, regardless, it's one of those things that like because the barrier to entry is so low, even if it's not an asset flip, that if you were an indie game and you got noticed, before, maybe you were competing with, I'm just gonna make up numbers, but maybe you were competing with 100 other indie games that came out that year, and now it's like if you're an indie game, you're competing with 1,000 or 2,000 indie games that come out a year, some of which are asset flips, some of which are just general crap, but some of which are presumably quality. and you kind of have to suddenly that pool is way bigger, so it's even harder to get noticed than it was when when the indie game kind of coming out was like a miracle. Now the indie game coming out is not a big deal, and
Right.
I think it's even worse trying to get noticed. So I think
Yeah.
I half agree with that tweet, that I do feel like they rarely get the recognition they deserve, in that somebody who's come out with a really innovative, interesting game has a hard time getting noticed. But I think I also agree with you, Tim, that it's not, that tweet doesn't paint the complete picture.
Yeah.
I feel like the complete picture is more along the lines of it used to be, as an indie game, you were a fish in a pond. Now you're a fish in the ocean, and it's a lot but I do agree that I'm sure there's a lot of innovative games out there that fly under the radar and nobody knows about them. Color Jumper being a prime example to me, that like no one knows about it, and it's fantastic, and it's like that's a hard problem to solve. I guess is you got to hope that one of the curators, one of the what influencers, gets your game, and
Tastemakers.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and
sure.
I mean that's just you can't blame Steam because it was never Steam's job to begin with.
Yeah.
But like you said, 5 years ago, if a game was released on Steam, it was almost guaranteed to be sold well.
Yeah.
And when Steam opened the floodgates and let basically anybody do that, either through Greenlight or now it's just the Steam Access, I think it's called. Either way, it's just like that's not. It was never Steam's job to advertise. It was Steam's job to produce content or to distribute content.
Yeah.
So essentially,
Steam is just the storefront.
yeah. So essentially, all of the onus of marketing is back on the developer or like the streamer, or depending on whatever platform or genre of like art you're talking about. It's like,
Yeah.
now that all of that stuff is democratized, the right word, all of that stuff is like being just able to be distributed easily, all of the marketing is back on the artist who is creating it, and that causes a very severe problem because artists aren't really good at marketing, because that requires talking about yourself, and everybody hates doing that. So
Truth.
yeah, so excuse me, so it's one of those things where it's not really the fault of the distributors or even really the industry as a whole. I mean, to some degree it is the fault of the industry, but really it's the realization that the marketing and all of the mechanical stuff that has to go in the background to build an audience is back on either the developer or the studio that's developing the game. And that's a lot of work. That's almost as much as work as actually creating the content these days, because to do a very good marketing campaign that people will notice takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of time. You have to spread seeds everywhere and hope that some of them sprout, and you have to nurture all that stuff. And it's like,
Absolutely.
it's almost impossible to make a game and market a game at the same time, especially if you're just one person.
Oh, for sure.
I think that that's one of the problems, and I don't think that's a problem with any particular part of the industry. That's just the problem with the internet in general.
Yeah.
So
So Ben, I think you inadvertently stumbled onto our second topic here,
oh no, Daily Double.
which is there was some. What does everybody think about Steam's early access / open floodgates?
Breathe, Tim. Breathe, Tim. Breathe. I could go forever on that one. I really could.
Well, we're not gonna go forever, and I think we're gonna try to direct the discussion a little bit. But I will say, so one of the things is, I think, in terms of that's what I was thinking too, Hasserus. Tim needs a Lamaze class. But anyway, I mean, one of the things. So I think let's just outline the kind of benefits and briefly the benefits and the non-benefits bad things. I don't know, whatever you want to say about the policy, which is essentially anyone can post whatever they want. So that allows somebody like Ben to post Color Jumper because he's like, hey, my game is done. Here you go. And he's able to, jump through a couple of hoops and get his game up on Steam. And then it also enables somebody who's a little less scrupulous than Ben to go download a bunch of free gaming assets, slap together an absolute crap game that has minimal, if not negative, gameplay, and throw up what they call an asset flip, which is really fun when you see the same stupid zombie model in the same crate in every game. And then there's, of course, the dark side of Steam where, people upload essentially
racist, homophobic, horrible, harmful content that tells people that it's okay to hate people for the color of their skin or their, sexual orientation or who they are. Yeah, that's where my problem is.
Yeah.
That's where my problem comes in. And
Tim, I didn't know you had such a problem with my games, Tim. I mean, really. No,
it's just
not at all.
my issue with Steam's decision here is that this is the most non-decision they could have made. It got to a point where it was like, hey, we have people complaining about adult anime games, right? And they made that their battle point when most people are complaining about the games that have Nazi ideologies baked in. It has things like they have games that are coming out of Russia that are telling you it's okay to kill gay people. This isn't making it up. School Shooter Simulator, that's a thing that came out. That is something that people released on Steam, and now Steam is like, that's a-okay. You can release what you want because the market will decide for itself. You do realize that you have a responsibility to maintain that you are a reputable storefront. And by doing this, you're telling everyone, I don't care if you want, if you hate gay people, we're going to profit off of that. But you know what? Feel free to sell it. We don't support it, quote unquote, but you do support it because you're putting it on your store.
I have to. Okay. So, and of course, Tim puts me in the position of getting to defend these things. Which I'm gonna state right out front here. I don't agree. I do agree with Tim in that I think those games are harmful. I don't agree with any of those games. I don't agree with any of the things that that Tim is pointing out, like homophobia or discriminating against people because of their sexual orientation or anything else. I think we're all on the same page that those are horrible things that we don't like. I'm not a Nazi sympathizer. I'm not a Trump supporter. So now that that's on the table, my question becomes, I would imagine that Barnes & Noble carries those books.
I don't know.
Barnes & Noble or Amazon or any of those storefronts probably carry Nazi propaganda or something that or something leaning that way. I mean, and I'm sure, and maybe there is a curation there. But I'm willing to bet you can go into Barnes & Noble and find an awful lot of things that you disagree with, yet they are a storefront, and they're basically leaving it up to the customer to decide what they do and don't want. They're willing to sell you whatever it is, whatever hate speech propaganda thing you want to buy.
The problem with that is that they're selling it and profiting off of it, and that's not okay.
But so is Barnes & Noble. So
that's
I guess
what
what I'm suggesting is, but no one's, and here's my point. My point is not that it's right to do so. My point is, if Barnes & Noble is not obligated on some level, because we've all gone to Barnes & Noble and bought stuff, so you can certainly say we are all implicit. If you've bought something from Amazon, if you've bought something from Barnes & Noble, pick your store, right? You could certainly, if you're going to say that we're all implicit in, by buying stuff from Steam, we're implicit in those things, then we're also implicit in those things by buying stuff from Amazon.
Not really. I'm not buying that.
But
that
yeah,
illicit material. I'm not purchasing that. I'm
no.
supporting.
But I know Tim's argument is that by buying stuff from Steam, you are partly implicit by keeping those things available.
But you also can't go and buy a kit that shows you how to go shoot up a school. They're selling games that simulate shooting a school.
Okay, but I mean
that is where my problem.
But now you're starting you're going down a slippery slope where
that's a logical fallacy. No slippery slope.
Okay,
no logical fallacies.
but I will.
Slippery slope fallacy.
Yes, and you could easily argue that like Far Cry 5 is encouraging people to run around the country shooting people.
But it has story. It has.
But that doesn't. That doesn't justify it, though. That doesn't justify.
But it's not a justification. There's a difference between the game saying it's okay to go shoot up a school and a game saying, well, there's these mythical cultists in Montana or Oklahoma or wherever that are brainwashing people and taking over the country. That's very different from our current climate. In our current climate, it is not okay to go tell anybody to go shoot up a school. It is it is okay to say, hey, if there are cultists taking over, your country, fight for your country.
Yeah, and Ninja just brought up the point that I was going to do. It's just it's censorship, and it's like like freedom of speech and all this other stuff. It's like, well,
it's a private storefront.
Exactly.
Notice that that was not my argument.
No, I know.
I know.
But that's other people's
we gotta have somebody play devil's advocate.
Yeah. And now the other thing is Pizza bringing up this argument that says, "Are you sure there isn't opposition to the content being on, whatever that content is? Is there no opposition to that being on Amazon or on Barnes and Noble? Sure, there is. I'm not saying that there isn't opposition to that. What I'm saying is, we are telling essentially as gamers." We are saying to Steam, and the argument is, hey, these things are not okay to have on your shelves. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, are we asking Steam to do something that they are, A, not obligated to do, and B, that we're not asking of other places? Because no one is boycotting Amazon because they sell, presumably racist, homophobic, whatever thing you're into, or not into.
They are not selling something that tells you how to go in and shoot up your school.
Sure, they are. Absolutely,
no, they are not. That's
Tim. Have you never heard of the Anarchist Cookbook?
They don't. Most places do not carry that.
I don't think Amazon carries that.
I guarantee you can find stuff on Amazon that will tell you.
It tells you how to do things that are illegal.
That's correct. And
illegal things.
Owning the instructions to do something that is illegal is not illegal. It's only illegal to do the thing. And I'm not saying that these things are right, but what I'm saying is, it's not hard to find these things on other storefronts. And I think we're asking Steam to do something that they are not obligated to do and that we don't ask of any place else.
Well, it's their store. They can do whatever they want.
They can do whatever they
True.
They can do what they want, but that doesn't make it so that I'm going to support them. They're going to drive business away because of that. That's the problem.
They're going to drive your business away, but how many other people are they going to drive away?
Well, I can guarantee you a lot of folks are going to go to places like itch.io where they have a strong policy against racist and homophobic content. Mm-hmm. Places that actually support creators and support games that are designed to actually be games and be, tell a story or be an enjoyable experience, not ones that, tell you how to hate on people and treat people like total shit. So yep. I think that I think it comes down to what you want to buy and where you want to go ultimately. And I mean, Steam is the storefront, but I don't see I don't think GOG sells School Shooter Simulator. So
no, and I don't think Steam's going to be the primary storefront for much longer as it stands anyway, considering how they're treating the asset flips and all the way that they handle content in general. I mean, they're the biggest distributor right now, but everybody's creating their own storefront at some. I mean, Blizzard Battle.net has had one for a long time.
Origin,
and, Origin is another one, and GOG, and itch.io, and everyone's creating a storefront because it's easier to do that now, and it's easier to distribute that stuff now. And now that Steam actually has competition, they're finding ways to make money, and that might be by compromising the content that they bring into the storefront, and that's how they're making money, and that's not okay, and that's going to eventually just lose them more business.
Yeah, and this is coming on the heels of Steam having a crusade against specifically anime games, games that had nudity and things like that. They refused to remove certain games that were promoting literal hateful content, but they were crusading against sexual content in games. So they have this issue where they cannot decide what they want to do, and then the decision they make is, you know what, we give up. We don't want to do any of this stuff because we can't win with you. And most of that is just because of brigading, because of trolls, because of hate groups actively trying to push certain agendas to Steam. And the vocal minority is always the loudest, and that's a big part of the problem, is that Steam is kind of just doing the throw their hands up. And I can't necessarily blame them, but I also can, because I think that they could do, with the amount of resources they have and how much money they bring in, there is no excuse not to curate your storefront. And so
here's the thing,
that's
though.
what really blew me away when it came to they're changing their policies to where Steam is just, pay $100 and get your game on there. It's just like, why not have people sit there and at least cursory look at the games, like the storefronts and everything else? It's just like, it would definitely be an investment of resources, but they're making so much money off of that. It's like, why can't you have some kind of...
And here's the thing. They're making so much money now. They're making so much money without doing that thing. And, everyone, and there's a few people in the chat saying this too, Steam isn't going to be around much longer, and I disagree. Whenever you have a platform that's making that much money, no matter how good your platform coming in, no matter how good the newcomer platform is, that first mover advantage is I don't want to say it's insurmountable. It's not. But they'd have to really, 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 really screw up. And the problem is that for every Tim...
they're trying.
For every Tim... No, yeah, but that's the thing. One thing that I think we don't realize on this show, but kind of in general when you talk about streamers and vocal gamers and things like that, is we all kind of breathe in the rarefied air, right? We're looking at bigger trends. We're looking at a lot of bigger kind of issues and making decisions. Whereas I would venture to bet that the majority of people who go on Steam and purchase Call of Duty and play Call of Duty, and I'm not picking on Call of Duty fans, but go on Steam and purchase a AAA game and play the games that they like to play. I would bet that they never encounter any of those hate games, because all they're doing is going on and searching for the AAA game they want and purchasing it and playing it. And B, I'm willing to bet they don't say a word. As long as Steam has their Steam sale and you can go on there and buy, Call of Duty for $20 when it was $60 6 months ago, I'm willing to bet, no matter how loudly people complain, Steam is not under any actual obligation to do this, and there is going to be some level of gamer like Tim who's going to say, "Oh, this is available at GOG. I like their policies better. I'm going to go over to GOG."
Yeah, and I was never trying to imply that Steam is going to go out of business. It's just there's more options out there now.
Yeah.
Interestingly, Facebook is trying to get away from people espousing, hate speech and harmful ideologies and things that are actually aimed at causing active harm to specific groups. And Steam's doing the exact opposite.
Yeah.
It's just funny to me because I feel like we live in a topsy-turvy world all of a sudden, because it's like Facebook of all places, who were like, for the longest time, nah, we don't care. We'll sell your data.
Yeah.
You can't do anything about it. Ha ha. And then Steam was kind of like, for a while there, like, we want to listen and we want to do better. And, we want you guys to help curate. And then all of a sudden they're like, nah, we give up.
Well,
it's crazy to me.
I will be honest with you. I don't envy being Steam or Facebook.
Nope.
Because whenever you start changing policies like that, whatever the policy is, it doesn't matter if your policy was originally super socially conscious, like we don't take racist games or whatever, right? And you change that policy, and even if it wasn't socially conscious and you're making it socially conscious, like no matter which way you change that policy, you're pissing off some portion of your users, because some portion of your users are going to argue it on the basis of censorship and say, oh, now you're just censoring, you're censoring people's freedom of speech. I don't agree with it, but they can say it. And then you've got another.
I hate that argument so much.
It's not
a private storefront; they can do what they want.
You're correct. I'm not saying you're. But see, that's the interesting thing that I'm learning as I get older is being right is only half the battle.
Very
I
true.
mean, just because
That's
you're
very true.
right doesn't mean the world works that way. You're just right.
Yeah, but it's also important to call out the bullshit and fight for what's right. And that's part of this is like, and Eric, I appreciate you playing devil's advocate on that, because somebody had to, like that's one of those things that's not easy to do. So thank you for taking that because I see both sides, and I've seen both sides, because my Twitter has literally been divided like down the center on this issue. Like people who are like, this is the dumbest thing that Steam's ever done, and people who are like, yay, go Steam, good job, yay for free speech. And it's like, it's just one of those things that's like, maybe I don't think Steam could have won either way here, but I think that to me, in my opinion, they took the exact wrong decision, because they picked the middle ground rather than siding with one side or another. And that's where the problem is that I think that they just kind of threw up their hands and went, you guys duke it out. We don't care. We're going to profit off everybody. And it's like, what are you guys, gun runners? Like, you're going to sell to both sides of the war and just fuel the fire? Like, make a decision. As a company as big as they are and what they do, they have, to me, they have an obligation.
A moral obligation.
A moral obligation to represent their brand by supporting, what they see as the right thing. And I'm not saying, either way it would be right. Like if they sided and said, well, we're going to allow everything from anime boobs to school shooter simulators, like, they at least made their stance, and then I can make the choice of, hey, I don't support that, I'm going to move on. But instead they've just said, here, everybody, have your cyanide lollipops and lick them, and we can all, die together.
Now wait a minute. So are they still banning the anime games now?
No, they reversed that decision.
So essentially, they did make a stand, and they just made the stand that you just argued for. Or not argued for, but said, that would, influence your decision. So they made the stand that we're no longer going to ban anime games. We're just going to not ban anything, and here's a free-for-all. So they literally did that. So
that's the middle. That's the middle ground. The other ground, the other side is that they're I mean, I guess to an extent, you're right. I mean, they kind of did pick the other side. It's just rather than, like they said, we don't support those games, we don't like those games, but they have a right to exist. And I mean, I disagree vehemently, but if that's kind of their stance, is that it has a right to exist, so therefore they will sell it, as long as it's not a troll game or blatantly illegal. And that's like saying, because like there's very little that's illegal unless it's showing you specifically how to make illicit things. But that said, it's, I don't know. It just sucks. It's one of those things that's like, I'm just really disappointed in Steam in that regard. Like I don't consider myself like some social justice zealot or anything like that. Like I'm all about like ending racism and loving your fellow person. But I cannot support a decision that says it's okay to release, just the shit that's come out recently.
Not only release, but to profit off of it.
Yes,
and that's the big thing for me.
Yeah, and that's it for me too, because it's not like they're the ones putting the games out, but they are putting it out. Like it would be like if I opened up a store and then I had these Nazi flag cakes and I put them in my storefront window and said, "Yeah, buy my cakes," and it's like it just sucks, because it's like it's not something that represents me. And it's not something that represents Steam, but it is. You're being implicit in supporting that by putting it in your storefront.
Right, but now the other argument though is, why not just leave it up to the customer? I mean, as a customer of your bakery, if I
And
see
that's
that
what they're doing.
if I see that in the window, that is what they're doing. But I guess I'm trying to reframe it slightly and say, if in the bakery analogy, right? If I see that in your window, I have a decision to make as a customer, and I go, well, either I want to go into this bakery and buy something, or I don't, based on what I'm seeing.
Well, and that goes back to the moral obligation. It's like, as a company, you're putting yourself forward in a certain way, and you have to represent yourself in that way. And I mean,
But
in
do
some
companies
degree,
really have a moral obligation? I mean, anything
No,
beyond
but
the
they
law?
should.
I feel like they should. Yeah.
Well,
I feel like
should
feel-
and do are two different things.
No,
I feel
and
like
know
there are many companies that have ethics and morals that I stand beside and I support willingly. I mean, Google does the same thing. Google does have a moral ground that they stand on, and they've made that abundantly clear time and time again. And I agree 100% with that. And that's why I use all Google products, even if they sell all my info to, Facebook or whatever. I don't care. It's one of those things that I can trust that they will make the right decision should something like this monumental thing come up.
So Ninja has an interesting point. What if we were to, I mean, there's certainly a vocal number of both game critics and game developers who want games to be considered art. I mean, if you're talking about art and you're saying
not all games can be art.
Well,
not all games are art.
It's not only that not all games, it's not an art thing. It's still, art is an expression of your opinions and thoughts, and that goes back to speech. And anybody has the right, if it's a private storefront, they can censor that.
Sure.
That's their job.
That's the
So
right.
art is a way of expressing things through a different medium. It's expressing a conversation or an idea through a different medium. That's all art is.
Yep.
And you still have the right to censor that if you don't want it on your storefront.
Oh, that's
like I'm not saying censor everything that you disagree with. It's just like there are limitations, and Steam made their decision.
At the very least, they should have, from the get-go, made it super hard to get to the things that get flagged as, like, morally reprehensible games. Racist,
all right.
Homophobic. And they said that they're working on that, but they made this decision without any planning, without anything like that. And that's where my issue comes in.
So let's wrap this up real quick. Not the show, just the topic. So the way to
has been an hour.
The way to wrap. Well, I think we can
know.
squeeze in the last topic here. But for this topic, to wrap it up, here's the thing: Steam made their decision. Essentially, the floodgates are wide open. You can post whatever you want on Steam. So, Tim, are you still buying games on Steam?
I mean, it's like, am I still buying stuff at Walmart? It's cheaper and easier than just about everything else. So I don't have much choice right now. As the choice changes, yes.
That's a yes.
I will stop.
Yes, presumably until something better comes along. Ben, still buying stuff on Steam?
Not really. I haven't bought a game for 6 months.
So okay, but game X comes out that everyone wants, and you're like, holy crap, I can't live without Game X. You buying it on Steam?
It depends. If there's other options, then I'd probably go with the other options.
I would go with other options if they were
most
available.
likely I wouldn't have the time to play a game anyway. So
right. This is a hypothetical though. So essentially, if it's available on Good Old Games, same price, you're going to Good Old Games, not Steam.
Yeah. Why not? I mean, Steam is a great platform for organizing my digital content, but that's not. I don't care.
Yeah.
If I can get it somewhere else, then I'll get it somewhere else.
Yeah, fair. Okay. I've at the moment still buying stuff on Steam, but I'll be honest, this discussion probably convinced me to start looking at other stores a little bit more closely. So there you go. The third topic that also involves games is really kind of a broad topic, but we don't have to spend tons of time on it. But I'm curious about people's take on game criticism and a sustainable gaming community, and I mean that. So let's preface this a little bit with some stuff. Was that directed at me, Tim? Did I just say I like racism? Okay.
No, Code Artistic Ninja just said
Oh.
that he likes games that have racist
he likes
content.
provocative games. Okay,
No,
got
I
it.
just said you can be provocative without being racist or harmful, and he said I like games like that, which is saying, oh, I support racism, and that's
Yeah.
exactly what you're saying when you say that. Like
Fair.
you either detest racism and you get rid of it, or you support racism. Make your choice, buddy. That's
So-
all I gotta say.
All right, moving on. moving on. Moving on to game criticism, and let's touch on a couple of things here. So there's a couple of ways to do game criticism. The first one I'm going to point out, one that I enjoy yet probably don't entirely agree with, is zero punctuation, for instance, and that is the cynical game review, right? The idea that all games are crap and we're just going to highlight the least crappy of the games. And all the other crap games, get kind of thrown on the funeral pyre, and we watch them burn. It's super entertaining, but it's probably overall kind of a negative criticism experience. Then you've got things like GameSpot or PC Gamer or Eurogamer, where they give theoretically objective reviews, but basically every game is 7 and up. It's it's always the lowest possible score is a 7 out of 10, right? Which in theory 7 out of 10 should be like it's a pretty good game, but in practice 7 out of it's like if it goes below 7, like their advertisers are threatening to pull ads, right? And then you've got something like Jim Sterling, who is a little bit more honest, well, we're presuming his honesty, right? But he's certainly independent, and the general perception of Jim Sterling is that he at least gives his opinion the way he sees it.
Right.
He's not necessarily you don't necessarily agree with him. His opinion's not necessarily the mainstream opinion, but in theory, we assume that he's giving us an honest opinion. And the question kind of is, this goes back to how do you make decisions about what to buy? Now, I'm gonna preface this with my own personal take, in that I tend to buy older games. I don't like to spend a lot of money on games, so older games, the prices drop, and it's very rare if I spend over $20 on a game. Most likely I will spend $5 to $10 on a game, and that's AAA games. I mean, I think I bought Borderlands 2 for like a year or two ago for like $10 or $5, and it's great. Of course, I'm not playing it when everyone else is playing it, but that's not important to me. I just want to have a game to play. So for me, my general technique is see a game is on sale, remember that game was considered reasonably good, and then go do a search to, say, Rock, Paper, Shotgun, which is a site that I particularly tend to agree with their opinions, and, dig up the Rock, Paper, Shotgun review from like 2-3 years ago, and then like see if it sounds like something I would enjoy. Now, the things that I don't do, I don't pre-order, and I generally am not buying new games for $60 a piece.
Pre-ordering's stupid. I don't know why anybody does.
I wholeheartedly agree, but I also think that buying games for $60 is kind of stupid. I don't know how people justify $60, $70, $80, $100 for a game. I can't justify that in my entertainment budget.
I could go off on how they justify that.
Yeah, there's actually a very good extra credits video talking about why games are so expensive.
No. I'm not saying
more expensive.
I'm not saying that I'm not saying the game companies can't justify their cost.
You can't justify that.
I'm saying I can't justify in my personal finances spending $100 on a game.
Yep.
And the only game I've ever done that for, and that's if you include the cost of the console, is Breath of the Wild, because I wanted to play it so bad I literally went and bought a used Wii U so I could play it. And Breath of the Wild has never come down in price, so I've literally spent full price on it. That's the only game in like the last 5 years I think I've spent full price for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, as far as like how I manage reviews, it's like if I hear people talking about it, or if I get word of mouth recommendations, then I purchase it. Like that's really it. I don't go to any review sites. I don't care what other people think about it that I don't know. Like a stranger has about as much credentials as a stranger with like a reporter's degree or whatever. So it's just like I don't really
Yeah.
give a crap about a stranger's opinion. If my friends like it, I'll probably like it.
Yeah.
And then I go buy it. Like I don't really care about review sites.
So does it matter to you at all that, for instance, review sites, there's a number of review sites that are considered to be like kind of in the pocket of, game developers, as in, these let's say Ubisoft, for instance, has an advertising relationship with the site. So Ubisoft games are perceived, if this could be real, this could be a perception, but, the perception will be that Ubisoft games on that site are rated, higher than they should be because, because there's that financial relationship.
Well,
Right.
I mean, it shouldn't happen for like journalistic integrity. That's bad.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't go to those sites anyway. So I don't care.
Tim, what do you think about all this?
I tend to pick a wide variety of sources for when I make my decisions. Most of my decisions come from watching gameplay and making the the decision by myself nowadays. And I think that's kind of the way it's going is influencers making those pushes. Even if they're sponsored, like it's hard to fake really loving a game.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also you can't cover up core gameplay in a stream. Like you can't you can't make it an invisible thing. Like it's in a gameplay video or review, they can gloss over the bad parts.
You can edit things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct. And
Absolutely.
in a stream, you can't. Like I play like Far Cry 5 on my stream, and I love that game, and I always have a blast with it. But there are a lot of bugs in it, and I get glitches every once in a while and things like that, and crashes and stuff, and that's the sort of stuff that you won't see in a review.
And
most of the time is so.
And one of the reasons that I actually, and it's funny that you mentioned that, one of the reasons I wanted Breath of the Wild is I watched so much gameplay on YouTube and on Twitch that I was like, oh my God, I so want to do that. And, that was one of really the thing that sold me on Breath of the Wild was watching other people play it. So I wasn't going out of my way like reading reviews for Breath of the Wild. I was literally watching people and going like, wow, I want to do this. This looks really fun. And I wonder if I wonder, and maybe this is what we close out with. I wonder if is Twitch the death of games journalism?
To people who actually care. Maybe.
And I say Twitch. By Twitch, I mean streaming, Tim. So I don't mean to exclude Mixer or YouTube gaming.
No, I understand. No, I think here's my take on it is that games journalism will always be around because there's always going to be a need for professionals who are closer to the industry, who go to E3, who go to these gaming trade shows and have the insight that and understanding and history that maybe a regular YouTuber may not have. That's part of why there are still film critics, even though Rotten Tomatoes exists. So I think it's the same kind of concept, is that there will always be game critics, there will always be game reviewers, and I think they will always exist solely because there's a need for that professional viewpoint, whether it's perceived as biased or not.
Right.
It's that style of presenting of writing and they're often extremely thorough with their gameplays. They play through the whole game before their review. Whereas a lot of your YouTubers and things will play maybe 2 hours of the game and never get to the end, or you'll watch an entire playthrough and your game's spoiled. So that's a difference too that I think has value.
Yeah, and going off of that point, I would highly recommend the YouTube channel Super Bunny Hop, because that is a gentleman who does have a journalistic degree, and he reviews video games and like movements in the video game industry. And it's actually very interesting to watch this stuff, like watch him do research and watch him actually talk about this kind of things with a journalistic degree where he's actually doing things professionally. It's very, very interesting to look at.
Yeah, I mean, then that's
Super
fair.
Bunny Hop. I highly recommend checking his channel out.
And I guess in terms of game journalism, you could always talk about something like Extra Credits, which isn't journalism, isn't review journalism, but it's certainly like game industry and game development journalism, talking about, trends in games and, whether they're good or bad for the industry and, things, bigger picture things. So I suppose in some way, gaming journalism will always be there. I just kind of wonder, I do kind of wonder how much people are going to be depending on reviews in 5 years, when what you're probably going to do, my guess would be that you're going to start picking up your favorite streamer. You're going to watch them play game X or game Y, and you're going to say like, oh crap, game X looks really cool. I'm going to purchase that based on the fact that I watched Tim play it for an hour the other night and I thought it looked great. And Tim says it's good. So I guess I kind of feel like game reviews are just going to become less and less relevant. I mean, not that you're not wrong. They're certainly going to be more in depth than watching Tim stream it for an hour. And that's not a dig on you, Tim, although your gameplay is atrocious. No.
I mean, you're not wrong. I can't say you're wrong.
No, but seriously, I kind of wonder if, and I'm not saying that their days are numbered, and certainly I was being a little bit hyperbolic with the death of games journalism, right? But at the same time, I kind of feel like that's the way things are going. Everyone, not everyone, but a lot, like that's the new thing, is everyone watches people streaming videos. Or streaming gaming, and I don't know. I kind of feel like that's where it's heading. Like, go find a VOD of some of your favorite streamer playing it, and figure out if you like it or not.
I think there's a lot of unknown there too, because we don't know where streaming is going to be in 5 years.
Yeah,
True.
True.
So, because that whole thing could collapse in on itself, because with something like with how big it's become and ubiquitous it's become, is that going to experience a bubble like burst, kind of like television did? Is something going to come along and have an impact on that? But that's another discussion.
That's a whole different topic.
And
I'm just saying that in like 5 years it might be a different story. Maybe we'll swing back to journalistic reviews being the norm.
Yeah, that could be.
Hard to tell.
I just want to answer Chucko's point here that if we start listening to Tim's game preferences, we'll all be playing waifu games. And I just want to reiterate to what Mintrovert is saying, that what's the problem with waifu games?
Yeah.
And I will be honest that if there was a Linux version of say it Tim, because I can't say it,
Senran Kagura,
I would have already purchased it. So
it's fun, man, and it has boobies.
It's pretty great.
Not exposed ones, but still.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how far they go without actually showing you anything, and I think that might be the brilliance.
The masters of that.
That might be the brilliance of that. I'm gonna assume that's the genre.
What I love about it.
Yeah, I'm gonna assume that
is a whole genre.
It's
perverted. Ecchi is perverted in Japanese, so that's kind of what it is, just ecchi games.
Yeah, Chucko, same here, man. We just started dropping frames for like no apparent reason.
Yeah.
Thankfully we're recording it locally, so I'll tell you what, guys. Let's wrap it up. Gonna hit the button here.
I realized I haven't eaten in like 20 hours, which is why I've been kind of quiet this stream. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, I'm kind of hungry myself.
Quiet?
So.
I thought you were coming through the screen, man. All right. We've reached our social interaction quota for the week. Where can people find you on the interwebs? Ben Burns.
You can find me online at Twitch, Twitter, Patreon, and YouTube at Ben_Burns. It's BURNES.
And Tim, where can people find you on the interwebs?
You can find me on Twitter at InsertCoinTim, and you can also find me on the ever lovely Mixer. I'm live Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time at mixer.com/InsertCoinTheater.
Cool. And you can find me on Twitter at ZaxaCMK, on twitch.tv/ZaxaCMK, and on youtube.com/EricKleinCreate. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thanks to chat for being here. And we'll catch you all next week. Bye-bye.
Later, guys.